If we go to the first slide, the title slide, it's quite self-explanatory. It tells you how the women and girls from the two cities of Bhubaneswar in the state capital of the province Odisha, and Jaipur, the state capital of the province of Rajasthan, decided that MHHM, or menstrual health and hygiene, has to become everyone's agenda and business, and that it cannot be buttonholed into just a women and girl alone issue. And in both the wards we worked, in both the cities we worked in one ward each, with Bhubaneswar having a population of more than 12,000, with 47% representing women and girls. And in Jaipur with over 14,000, with about 52% representing women and girls. Next slide tells you about the concerns and challenges that we faced. Very important because COVID became a turning point. The pandemic brought to the fore all the sort of age-old neglect and discrimination, indifference of all concerned. Even the modicum of service and support and program collapsed. Women were left to fend for themselves. And the home, certainly not a nurturing or a protective space. All the unequal norms were sort of, haunting them. And even though they were all locked up in separate spaces, they all decided that enough is enough, time to speak and act and build what they called a localized and a saturated response. Let's go to the next slide. There we actually go into what they did in terms of self-diagnosis, because they felt that it was time to speak up, reclaim their dignity, build local solutions, and if possible, kindle, the conscience of others and sort of bring people around. Situational assessment, not only by women and girls, but by all their allies and stakeholders, revealed the kind of pain and trauma they had gone through, particularly women and girls with disability, given their dependence on community toilets, public taps, and, having the burden of living in homes with insanitary toilets. All the modicum of services I said earlier was collapsed, and the home became a site of conflict and stress because the men, boys, and the older people just could not understand the predicament that women and girls were going through. And in fact, in some cases, even became uncaring. You go to the other side of the slide, you find that they decided now enough is enough. They'll speak up in every public and private space, and ensure that they bring a critical group of people to co-campaign and co-educate people and change people's mindset, attitudes, and norms. Together they will act, because nothing demonstrates better than action, and then bring all the stakeholders in, build local leadership, create what is called a people's movement, and then also innovate side by side. The innovations that they did, one, start storing pads and sanitary napkins so that they're not left high and dry. Second was to not only spread education on menstrual health and hygiene, but also provide psychosocial support. And third was actually to produce something that was sustainable and safe, a product that is a biodegradable. Go to the next slide. The first innovation on the pad bank was triggered not only by the unequal norms, but by the fact that the government not list napkins sanitary napkins as an essential product. So not only were the shops closed, but all the emergency relief had no provisioning for it. More importantly, everybody was charged the kind of pain and trauma the women had gone through. They all came together, pulled in money, bought napkins, partly from the market, partly from the napkin unit that was producing biodegradable. They collected almost 3,000 pads. Some of it was sold, some of it was distributed free, depending on the needs of people. And they established that very important point about self-reliance, and that they're not going to beg, hold their hands, and beseech to people when they're in crisis. And now they're going to scale this up. Next slide actually tells you how they went about working on the psychosocial support. 3 sets of people they worked with, spearheaded it. One, women and girls with disability. You can see both Jumri, a young girl, and Kali Devi, a middle-aged woman, taking up the mantle of education and providing psychosocial support. Jumri went into schools, colleges with young people, built study groups and workshops. Kali Devi went into religious meetings, mothers' meetings, community meetings, and started changing attitudes. In the next slide, you will find, the frontline workers also jumped into the whole thing. They are a huge number of people, so they integrated it into all their activities once the lockdown was, relaxed, and made it part of their, made it mandatory in each of their activities, and created what is called a sense of, engagement of the system and the state. The men went straight into the family, started changing norms, went into with other men, went into local leaders, went with, people that were actually sort of, hindering and hampering processes, and tried to change attitudes. Together, they made a big difference. And while this was happening on, next slide was actually the sanitary napkin unit producing the biodegradable napkins. In both cities, we had set up one unit each, very successful to begin with, actually set it up and even sold. Now they're facing challenges because the product needs to be, the user is not satisfied. They've already gone into retraining and getting a new mold so that they could redesign the project. And more importantly, they will have to do consumer user education, because the competition from the products in the market is very, very high, and they really have to build in the message of, eco-friendly and something that is locally produced, and to sustain local economies and local production. Lastly, when we come into the achievements, we actually scaled up. Last slide, achievement slide, actually find that, it was led by women and girls, then became what is called 157 of them, then became an all stakeholder movement with 600 change agents. A lot of attitudes and practices got changed, looked into, inquired and changed. A lot of stakeholders, right from bilateral agencies, government, to local stakeholders, to implementers, became part of the process. And the whole idea of saturating actually went to the extent of, reaching out to 14% or nearly 15% in both cities, and about 5,000, over nearly about 5,700 people were reached out to, not only with information, education, but also a lot of negotiating skills were, imparted to them by the women and girls and the change agents. And of course, we are going to continue to strengthen all the innovations that we had started. Way forward are very simple. The last slide, the way forward is very simple. We're going to scale this up across wards. There is also already an enthusiasm from other wards to sort of, emulate this practice. We are going to build a curriculum that's not only centered on knowledge, information, but also on the negotiating skills. What do you do to change attitudes and gender norms? And of course, institutionalize it across all the sort of, centers, whether it's health center, school, or, the childcare centers, or even the legal aid centers. Everywhere we will institutionalize it. And of course, not only talk about eco-friendly products, but now taking off from what Sylvia said, also look at, menstrual plan and other products. So with this, I end, and my last two slides are really acknowledgement, both to Water for Women and all my, compatriots who were part of this. We were part of this entire sort of, movement of change. And we are very confident that the next 2 years, we're going to really see a paradigm shift. Thank you. Thank you, Jose.